Der kostbarste Besitz auf dieser Welt aber ist das eigene Volk und niemals verzweifeln.
We've got to do a better job of getting across that America is freedom.
Und niemals verzweifeln.
What if we're just a bunch of absurd people who are running around with no rhyme or reason?
America, fuck yeah!
America became the world's mightiest industrial power. Save the world from tyranny.
Capitalism is the best system ever devised.
We have become the greatest nation on the face of this earth.
Our Constitution works.
The United States and our allies have prevailed.
And we have won.
Because once you give up on the notion of fully grasping the way the world is, you're going to talk about what are the ways in which I can sustain my quest for truth.
If there is anyone out there who still doubts that America is a place where all things are possible,
Und niemals verzweifeln.
who still wonders if the dream of our founders is alive in our time, who still questions the power of our democracy, tonight is your answer.
Now, if you ask what media can I turn to get the right answers, first of all, I wouldn't tell you that because I don't think there's an answer. The right answers are what you decide are the right answers. Maybe everything I'm telling you is wrong, okay? Could perfectly well be, I'm not God, but that's nothing for you to figure out. I mean, I could tell you what I think happens to be more or less right, but there isn't any reason why you should pay any attention to it.
And scientists could talk about this in terms of, adducing evidence and drawing reliable conclusions and so forth and so on. Religious folk could talk about this in terms of surrendering one's arrogance and pride in the face of divine revelation and what have you. But there are all ways of acknowledging our finitude and our fallibility.
And as president, I can report to the nation, aggression is defeated, the war is over.
Angry, heavy metal subculture. Where were the parents?
Violent movies.
South Park.
Video games.
Television.
Entertainment.
Satan.
Cartoons.
Zoom. Society.
Toy guns. Drugs.
That is pervasive in the social sciences. Society or culture are treated as causal entities with unity of interest, so to speak.
Exactly.
Not recognizing that that's logically impossible from an evolutionary perspective.
He's a threat to everything, not just you, but everything you love.
How's my life? I'm sorry. She died a few minutes ago, Mr. Kersey.
This is the story of a man who decided to clean up the most violent town in the world. Call him a mad vigilante. Call him a hero. Either way, he's always on target.
When fortune smiles on something as violent and ugly as revenge, it seems proof like no other that not only does God exist, you're doing his will.
His whole family.
Get down, buddy, get down!
In certain extreme situations, law is inadequate. In order to shame its inadequacy, it is necessary to act outside the law to pursue natural justice.
Have you protected a lot of children before?
Bodyguards gotta be close to people.
Good things happen too.
Yeah? Like what?
Like meeting me.
Feet down! Run!
What are you gonna do?
What I do best. I'm gonna go get her.
There's a lot of units out there right now. Tell me, I can't get anywhere near it. I want to find out how to get in touch with my daughter. How do I get information on my daughter? I don't have any of that information right now. I do. Why in the hell not? Get over now.
We're at war, they said. And I thought, they have learned nothing, absolutely nothing, from the history of the 20th century. From 100 years of retaliation, vengeance, war, 100 years of terrorism and counterterrorism, of violence met with violence.
As if, like the tiger, we still had to kill
to live, or, like the robin redbreast, to defend a nesting territory. But war, organized war, is not a human instinct.
Inevitably, in any discussion on war, at a certain point in the discussion, somebody would say, oh, well, it's human nature.
There is no nature.
The environment determines whether any kind of propensity that you have is acted out.
Human nature isn't good or evil. Human nature is constituted. It's constituted by how we act, human nature is in fact the history of habits and practices that are the result of past struggles, of past hierarchies, of past victories and defeats.
Our system completely broke down and failed. It gave not only the wrong answer, it mishandled every piece of evidence that we had.
This is, I think, actually the key to rethinking revolution, is to recognize that revolution is not just about...
It's not an event.
A transformation for democracy. Revolution really requires a transformation of human nature so that people are capable of democracy.
I think one of the great ironies of the election is democracy produced just the opposite result from the one most people thought it would. It created, for the first time, a government dominated by Shiite religious politicians, acting not necessarily without regard to the nation's interests, but primarily on the basis of their own agenda.
And it failed because in the end, there was nothing for the Mongols to do except themselves to adopt the way of life of the people they conquered. When they conquered the Muslims, they became Muslims. They became settlers. Because theft, war, is not a permanent state that can be sustained.
Violence leads to violence. He who lives by the sword dies by the sword. Well, I'm out of cliches now.
What, are you suggesting passive resistance?
No, I'm suggesting active fleeing.
Wars don't take place out of the rush of a population demanding war.
United States Marine.
Mad at Nazi bombs that murder little children.
Not just you, but everything you love.
Oh, I'm so glad. But I know that when the time comes, I shall do what is expected of me. I may be killed in this war.
Why We Fight was actually the title of a series of World War II films that were done by one of the great directors.
Master of the art of motion picture entertainment, Frank Capra.
We appeal to people's self-interest and then put them into a situation which is based on self-sacrifice. Look at how we appeal to them. You're going to learn a skill, you're going to get a trade, you'll be able to go to college, give you all these benefits.
It isn't the population that demands war, it's the leaders who demand war and who prepare the population for war.
That looks completely different when you're in the middle of it than it does to the generals up on the hill.
If there was a spontaneous urge to kill, why would we need a draft?
I don't believe in war.
He doesn't believe in war, eh? Ha! Napoleon, eh? He believes in war. What are you going to do when the French soldiers rape your sister?
I don't have a sister.
That's no answer.
If you're neither seduced by the propaganda nor compelled to go by the draft, and if you resist, you will go to jail.
There is an age-old conflict between intellectual leadership and civil authority.
And there are other forms of, relations between parents and children, for example, involve forms of coercion, which are sometimes justifiable. But any form of coercion and control requires justification, and most of them are completely unjustifiable.
Jesus was then the intellectual and moral leader of his people, but he was facing an establishment for which religion was simply an arm of government.
Now, at various stages of human civilization, it's been possible to challenge some of them, but not others. Others are too deep-seated, or you don't see them, or whatever. And so at any particular point, you try to detect those forms of authority and domination which are subject to change and which do not have any legitimacy, in fact, which often strike at fundamental human rights. States are violent institutions. The government of any country, including ours, represents some sort of domestic power structure, and it's usually violent. States are violent to the extent that they're powerful. That's roughly accurate.
Turkish leaders of what was then known as the Ottoman Empire used the war to carry out the planned extermination of as many as 1.5 million Armenians.
During these purges, it's estimated that Stalin liquidated 20 million Soviet citizens.
It was directed against all the people of Cambodia who didn't fit into one dictator's vision of the future. Milosevic attempted to rid the region of non-Serbians. Long-standing tensions between two ethnic groups in Rwanda exploded into catastrophe.
In traditional cultures, homicide rates are far higher.
So if you multiply those up by the actual population size, in even the First World War, it would not exceed that. Is that really true?
Yes, yes. Yeah. Some, such as the Yanomamo, have 30 to 4% of males die by being killed by other males. The Gabusi is even higher. It's more like 40 to 50%.
And you have democracy. You have attempts of people trying to render accountable elites, kings, queens, suzerains, corporate elites, politicians, try to make these elites accountable to everyday people.
The law is made by very mortal people.
There's already very compelling evidence of lack of unity of interest within these entities called societies or cultures. You know, ferocious competition for access to resources, for access to mates, for access to territory.
It isn't the population that demands war.
You know, things are complex. It's not monolithic. I mean, the mass media themselves are complicated institutions with internal contradictions. So on the one hand, there's the commitment to indoctrination and control. But on the other hand, there's the sense of professional integrity.
I think it's really important that we don't overstate the case.
Orgiastic pleasure has its place. Intellectual pleasure has its place. Social pleasure has its place. Televisual pleasure has its place. You know, I like certain TV shows. My God, when it comes to music, you know, Beethoven's 32nd Sonata.
And that we admit that there are cracks and fissures in all of these corporate structures. If you take this to its logical conclusion, one would have an image that we are, in fact, at the end of the world is nigh, and we are all completely brainwashed. And I don't believe we're there yet.
If God punished you, it's still a universe of meaning.
The encircled numbers are locations.
Then so-and-so is probable, then so-and-so is probable. Therefore, my dear Watson, and you sort of feel that there's so much in the way of tenuous links.
It's all 23, 2-3, driver's license, social security number, everything.
Each one of them may be vaguely plausible, and the next one may be plausible.
Yeah. No, the cipher was a way to find the way to read the map.
And the way to read the map can be found where the timely shadow crosses in front of the Liberty Bell.
But when you kind of add them all up together...
If she weighs the same as a duck, she's made of wood.
And therefore...
A witch!
A witch!
They have a sort of cumulative implausibility.
The Fibonacci numbers only make sense when they're in order. These are scrambled.
Unless you assume these letters are out of order too.
Because the big questions in life are tough. Why are we here? Where are we from? Where are we going? But if people believe in asshole, douchey liars like you, we're never going to find the real answer to those questions.
We have to put off the decision-making process in order to accumulate enough knowledge as a preparation for the future.
With the setup, the way America is set up to help the poor.
I believe that our education, like such as in South Africa and the Iraq, everywhere like such as, and
the one experience that I hope you have in either high school or college or somewhere in your education is to have some belief that you profoundly, deeply hold prove to be wrong. Because that is the most eye-opening experience you can have, and as a scientist, to me, it's the most exciting experience I could ever have.
We live in an in-between universe, where things change all right, but according to patterns, rules.
Now, how do you figure a thing like that?
Well, Oz women are funny sometimes. I guess it's just because they're women.
It's a little bit like the explanations the Greeks were satisfied. You know, Aristotle explain falling bodies by saying they're going to their natural place, which is toward the center of the earth. Well, when you say that, you really haven't learned anything more about falling bodies. It hasn't helped you to say that.
Ultimately, the issue is you have competing hypotheses and that generate specific predictions, and you pit them against each other and do the studies.